Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogun Shaki. We'll begin with the front pages of the daily, starting with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with 14 banks that fully meet new capital requirements. That's coming from CBN. CBN reduces interest rate to 27%. External reserves eat for the $3 billion. NECA demands reforms to ease the cost of living crisis. CBN's easing of credit conditions, a welcome timely intervention. That's coming from CPPE. You can see that story on page 19. On page 8, Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan storms Senate office, resumes duties. Defamation, federal government alleges plot to scuttle Natasha's trial. You can see that story on page 8 and 13. On page 9, Tinubu seeks reform of global financial architecture. First Bank set to launch a financial services for blind, physically challenged customers. You can see that on page 20. Top banner on page 26. PFN to government, fix economy, end corruption, empower citizens. Tinubu Atiku in fierce battle for Buhari's Northern Bloc. Davido becomes Grammy voting member for 2026 awards. Insecurity, nursing mom abducted, three soldiers jailed for selling arms to terrorists. Lastly, on Vanguard newspaper, Nupeng, Pegasan, a kick against federal government's planned sale of oil and gas assets. You can see that story on page 8. Away from that, we'll move to The Guardian. The Guardian front page says United Nations and Haiti. Wider cracks in world order amid warnings on aid court union's future. You can see that on page 6. On news page 4, high blood pressure puts 1.4 billion people at risk. World Health Organization warns. Relief for businesses as CBN eases a 4-year tightening, cuts interest rate to 27%. Concerns in Lagos APC as 4 elected female officials die in 2 months. Lastly, on the Guardian newspaper, the formation case adjourned as a Senate Natasha reached uncommon trust. You can see that on newspaper 3 of the Guardian newspaper. And let's move to the Nation. Nation is leading with how cut in interest rates will stimulate economy by experts. CBN slashes rate to 27%. 14 major banks fully recapitalized. You can see that story on the front page and it continues on page 3. Federation revenue rises to 3.6 trillion naira, since NRS chair. Monthly inflow up from 711 billion naira in May 2023. FIRS changes name to NRS. Federal government to build a 600 capacity hostel for Abuja Law School. Page 7 has that story. Top banner on the page 2. National Assembly unseals Senator Natasha's office. I won't apologize. Page 2 has a story. Page 13, Ibadan aglow for Ladoja's installation. Three soldiers get a life jail for selling arms to terrorists. You can see that on page 31. And lastly, on the Nation newspaper, court bars Chinese firm from Osiomo's power plant in Edo. You can see that story on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And lastly, the Punch is leading with 8.41 trillion naira oil theft drains economy, fuels investors' doubt. Experts fought lack of arrest prosecution in 4 years, I-0 oil theft. Regulator hails the lowest losses in 16 years amid reservation by analysts. Strike, Sano, NASO, extend ultimatum. Page 7 has a story on page 29. Arms racketeering. Three soldiers caught martialized, jailed for life. Pegasan Nupeng rejects government's plan to sell assets. Lagos call woman killed as container crashes a tricycle. Olubadan, Oyo restricts traffic for Ladoja's correlation. You can see that on page 2. Above the banner, Natasha resumes at Senate, calls Akpabio dictator. 411% revenue rise won't stop federal government borrowing. That's coming from FIRS. And lastly, on the Punch newspaper, 20 billion naira library fundraiser not for 2027. That's coming from Remi Tinubu. You can see that story on page 29. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies. Join us after the break for a brief analysis of some of these stories. Welcome back. If you're just joining me, this is Today in the News on Vanguard Life. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki. A few hours after Senate Wing office was unsealed by the Senate at arms of the National Assembly, along with combined personnel of security agencies yesterday. Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, PDP, Kogi Central, immediately resumed duties. Upon resumption, Natasha, who had been on suspension, remained resolute, insisting she had no apology to tender to the Senate. And recall that prior to her suspension, the Red Chamber had insisted the lawmaker apologize for failing to accept the seat allotted her in the chamber during plenary. Deputy Director of the Senate, Sergeant at Arms, Alabi Adedeji, flanked by security personnel, formally reopened Suite 2.05 of the Senate wing, Akpoti Uduaghan's office. The move came after a 6 month suspension formally lapsed earlier this month. With this development, the National Assembly has now granted the suspended Senate access to her office and the National Assembly premises. With her office now unsealed, Akpoti Uduaghan can access the National Assembly premises, potentially paving the way for her to resume her legislative duties. It was gathered that the move for Natasha's office to be opened prior to resumption is to enable her be at the hallowed chamber on resumption of plenary on October 7, 2025. According to a source, the decision was arrived at during yesterday's leadership meeting of the Senate, where a motion barring any changes will be moved by the minority leader of the Senate, Senator Abba, PDP Benue South, for her to apologize to her colleagues in the chamber. Senator Akpoti Uduaghan, while entering the National Assembly complex, was accompanied by hundreds of supporters who sang to usher her in. But some of the supporters were manhandled and stopped by security agents entering with her. And the story of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan and some of the issues in the Senate has been going on for a while now. But of course, she has officially resumed her duty in the Senate. Now let's move away from that. Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Yemi Cardoso, said yesterday that 14 Nigerian banks have fully met the new capital requirements in their ongoing recapitalization exercise. This is even as the Apex Bank reduced monetary policy rate (MPR) by 50 basis points from 27.5% to 27%, just as private operators commend the action and called for more reforms to ease the cost of living for Nigerians. Recall that the CBN introduced a new minimum capital base requirement for banks with tiers depending on license type. Before then, the last major bank recapitalization exercise in Nigeria was in 2004 when the CBN raised the minimum capital requirement for all banks from 2 billion naira to 25 billion naira. Now, this was a significant increase that led to a major consolidation in the banking sector as the number of banks was reduced from 89 to 25 through a series of mergers and acquisitions. In the current recapitalization exercise, commercial banks with its international authorization now have a new capital requirement of 500 billion naira. Commercial banks with national authorization have 200 billion naira as capital requirements, and commercial banks with regional authorization have 50 billion naira. And of course, you can get more of that story on our website and also inside the Vanguard newspaper. But let's end this on a lighter note with Mr. and Mrs. this morning. And the first person speaking is Mrs. Mrs. says, "Are you an enemy of progress? I said I want to be in the Guinness World Record by cooking for 2,000 guests, but you refused to support me." And Mr. replied, "No, I said you should wait until our daughter's wedding ceremony." Ah, cooking for 2,000 guests, that's a lot of money. The Idabasi didn't just spend small money. And Mr. is telling you, okay, wait, just do it together with the wedding. I don't want to spend too much. You can spend for this and also spend for the wedding together. I understand where Mr. is coming. When Mrs. is saying she wants to break the Guinness World Record, she also wants to copy Idabasi. Well, go ahead. Everybody wants to enter the record now, but of course, it's a big achievement. And I understand where Mrs. is also coming from. But we have a way to settle it. That's Mr. and Mrs. for you. Well, this is where we have to draw the curtain today. My name is Damola Ogunshaki. Do want to like and follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. You can also visit our website, www.vanguardng.com. Have a lovely Wednesday.